All right, music fans, welcome back. Harmless Dave here, talking about real music in real time for real people just like you and just like me. Been reading through this book. I continue to do so. Don Felder's Life in the Eagles, Both Heaven and Hell, from 1974 to 2001. I've been reading the book and then doing some videos based on maybe new information that I didn't know and that maybe folks out there might not know. Of course, you might want to grab a copy of the book. What I learned in my recent reading of the book, I am getting somewhat close to the end, I think. Let's see here. Yeah, page 236 or so. So what I'm learning is that Don Felder and Don Henley really maintained their relationship throughout the 1980s. It seemed fairly cordial. You may have heard that Don Henley actually asked Felder to tour with him for the first tour, which to me illustrates that, you know, whether Henley liked Felder or not, he knew what a great guitar player he was. And he was willing to basically underpay Felder so he could go out there and perform. Felder said it was the same salary as a sideman and not as, again, a bona fide member of the group. And this is a theme that seems to persist throughout this book. And I think it really is a big bone of contention for Don Felder, is that, hey, you know, I left my gig here with Graham Nash, and you know, things were going well. I was making some seriously good money, and I didn't have the headaches of these personality conflicts and so forth. What's interesting, though, is that as the 80s go by, it seems like Irving Azoff is trying throughout the entire decade to say, hey, great, you guys are doing solo records, fantastic, but we'd love to have you guys get back together again. Apparently, according to Felder, there were a couple of meetings that Glenn Frey and Don Henley had just hanging out together. So at that point, people started to speculate maybe the Eagles will get back together again. Of course, throughout the 1980s, Don Henley, his solo career was fantastic. I mean, I would have never predicted that Henley would change up his sound so much and really fit into that decade, but he did so. And he worked with a lot of great musicians, whether it was Bruce Hornsby, or Patti Smythe, or Martha Davis, Danny Korchmar, obviously. I mean, you look at album credits, I think even Axl Rose sang on a track from The End of the Innocents. So it shows that Don Henley had a really good ear for talent, and then he would say, hey, I want this person, and that person would show up. Whereas Glenn Frey kind of stuck to his old friends, whether it was Jack Tempchin or, you know, J.D. Souther or Elliot Schneider and those guys. I think he was far more comfortable just being, you know, Glenn Frey and, you know, putting it out there the way Glenn would write and produce and sing and so forth with collaborators he felt really comfortable with. But it's not like an all-star cast of players that show up. And, you know, MCA as a record label in the 1980s certainly didn't have the same clout as being on a Warner affiliated label. So Henley had that going for himself. They had a bigger budget. They made, for the most part, much better music, or they promoted music much more vigorously than MCA did. The only thing MCA really promoted was Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers and some of their dance and R&B artists that they had throughout the decade, but they didn't dump a lot of money into R&D, shall we say. So it's interesting, though, during the 80s, that there are several attempts to get the Eagles back together. The most interesting attempt was this band that was proposed to Irving, and Don Felder was the guy who did it. He said, hey, how about we do an Eagles band without Henley and Frey? And Azoff apparently was not really warm to the idea, but then they recorded some songs. They got Paul Carrack to sing, and they put a band together, and they thought the material was great. They sent it to Irving. He liked it, but then ultimately, my guess is that Irving presented it to the record label, and the record label said, nah, we're not going to do it. So that was kind of a devastating blow. Also, we learned that getting Joe Walsh into a room sober was a real difficult task. We learned that Timothy B. Schmidt was game to do anything. Tim Schmidt is probably one of the nicer guys in this whole situation, because he joins this band and he has to be really diplomatic and he has to just go along to get along. And he was able to do that. Whereas Felder, more of a type A personality, was like, no, I want to get paid. And that's the thing. Felder probably deserves to get paid. As much as these guys don't like it, you know, whether his input was as valuable as Don Henley and Glenn Frey's input, he should be paid for his work. And, you know, Don Henley set the stage early on when he said, hey, you can come join my band. I want you as my lead guitarist. And then, oh, and by the way, I'm going to pay you like 1/10 of what I'm getting paid. And again, as much as I think that Henley has a right to do what he wants to do, I mean, to have both Felder and Henley on stage would have been pretty cool. Again, I think Don Felder is the best guitarist the Eagles ever had. As much as I like Joe Walsh, I think Felder technically is a better player than Joe Walsh. Joe Walsh still is a great guitar player and can do pretty much anything, but Felder can do even more than that. and his technical skills, I think, are crisper, sharper. I think he can morph into different things. I think Joe Walsh is more like a bull in a china shop, and he's got his comfort zone. I think Felder has a much wider area that he covers and does it in a real expert way. Again, though, Joe Walsh isn't that far behind Felder, but it's a matter of a very good guitarist and a great guitarist, or a great guitarist and a close to being a genius guitarist. It's kind of like that. But throughout this entire ordeal, the 1980s, Felder was like, hey, my life ain't going so great. You know, he was sort of left behind. I mean, he had that first solo record, Airborne, which he talks about, which is a really underrated record. And somebody needs to re-release it and remaster it and put it back out there. I don't know if they've done that as of yet. I really used to like a tune called Bad Girls on there. There was even a video for that tune on MTV. But the record label wasn't really promoting it. They just agreed that they would put it out there for Felder, and he confirmed that, hey, you know, they weren't really that interested in trying to you know, make the phone calls and have the A&R crew get out there and really do what they normally do. They had no problem marketing, you know, Don Henley, or MCA did a pretty good job with Glenn Frey, but, you know, they could have done way better with Glenn. So by the end of the decade, this band that was supposed to happen without Frey and Henley didn't happen. And at that point, there were real talks of getting everybody back. Apparently what happened was Glenn and Joe didn't show up. Everybody was supposed to get back together and do some rehearsals and so forth, but it never came to fruition. So even during the 1980s, when everybody was really ensconced in their solo careers, it was a no-go. It was just didn't happen. It wouldn't happen until actually just a few years later, which the book doesn't get to yet, and I will be covering that portion of it when it does, because I'm sure we'll hear about trying to get Joe Walsh sobered up and to get the rest of the Eagles happy and on board with this. Don Henley had a very successful decade, so he's probably thinking, should I do this? Shouldn't I do this? Felder had more to gain because everybody else at least had a good solo career. Felder did not, which is unfortunate because he does have talent. But even Don Felder in this book kind of questions his singing ability, and he didn't have a lot of self-confidence as a vocalist. And I think obviously that whole Victim of Love debacle probably cemented that fact, and everybody else gets a song. Joe Walsh, who's got kind of an interesting voice, he gets a song, but I don't get a song. So I can kind of see his point from that perspective. But in any event, again, just a great read, a book that people should take a look at. And I will continue to do the video documentation of it, so people at least have that. Maybe it will fuel your interest, and you'll go over to Amazon and you buy lots of copies for your friends, family, and music geeks like yours truly. All right, again, thanks for watching and subscribing to the channel. Don't forget, if you're not a patron, you can sign up for just $1 a month. I typically will answer questions or just have pleasant conversations over there. Just like I'm a friend, I'm really very approachable, easy person to talk to. If I can get to your question within a couple of hours, typically that's what I do, unless I'm busy with family or something. That's normally the strategy here. But again, for $1 a month, you can help support the channel and keep it vibrant. We gain new patrons, but we lose them. So each month, it's kind of a battle to keep at least, the same level of patronage. So that's pretty much what I'm trying to do. All right, folks, thanks for watching. See you soon.